Look, I like Eddie Hearn. I think Eddie Hearn has done a lot of good for British boxing. I think he has revived British boxing to a great extent. But at the same time, I think he's also done some bad and some damage to British boxing. And these latest comments from Eddie Hearn, in my opinion, represent a new low point for him so far in his short career as a promoter. Very, very disappointed by these comments from Eddie Hearn. I'll leave a link to this article in the description below so you can read it for yourselves. But I'm just going to read from this some of the things Eddie Hearn has been saying, and it's basically Hearn's critique of Al Haymon and his PBC business model. Eddie Hearn says, the problem is that the market is so, excuse my language, fucked up. The fighters are getting overpaid for non-challenging fights, and it's got to stop, and it will stop, and it will stop very soon because they're so comfortable. They're so happy just doing that. What you need is more fights like Thurman Porter. You need more fights like Santa Cruz against Frampton. Less amount of shows, but a more consolidated effort to work hard on individual shows. Work towards individual events. He goes on to say, one of the problems with Haymon is he's an advisor, a manager, and their job is to get the most amount of money for the less risk. And that's not in the fans' interest. That's not in the broadcaster's interest. He's doing a great job for his fighters. But when you put your promotional hat on, you're not going to spend money with a broadcaster. And then when the deal is up and you turn around and say, do you like my product? How much are you going to pay me in rights fees? They're going to say, no, thanks. But if you want to pay us again, we'll do it again. The only way you're going to get broadcasters to pay rights fees is by providing great fights. And when you've got so many great fighters that you have to develop, you can't put on great fights all the time. If fighters are going to get paid a lot of money, they've got to be in real fights. Everybody loves paying fighters as much money as possible. They deserve it. But in a business sense, if you look at it on a balance sheet, and that's exactly what I do and I get criticized for in the UK, you're more of an accountant than a promoter. No, we just make a lot of money because the model is right. So let me say that again. No, we just make a lot of money because the model is right. So we know exactly what the income is. We know exactly what the expenditure is. And we always bring in 5%. It might sound boring, but when I look at the balance sheet for some of these shows, I'm just walking around in disbelief. I'm shaking my head in disbelief right now, Eddie Hearn, at the crap and the waffle that you've just put across in this interview, which Boxing Scene picked up, and the outright hypocrisy that you're demonstrating right now. Let me pick apart what Eddie Hearn just said. This guy has got the nerve, the audacity to start saying that Al Haymon is paying fighters too much for non-competitive fights. Has Al Haymon put on non-competitive fights? Yes, he has. But so have you, Eddie. And the big difference between what Al Haymon has done and what you've done is that at least when you watch an Al Haymon non-competitive fight, it's free. Eddie Hearn, you've put non-competitive fights on pay-per-view. And you've got the audacity to turn around and criticize Al Haymon for doing the same as you've done, but just doing it for free. Unbelievable. I mean, Eddie, you are losing your touch, mate. Yeah? You are losing grip of reality when you're coming out with rubbish like that. Anyone who doubts, and I know there are some people hell-bent on hating Al Haymon. Why? I've got no idea why. They're clearly not real boxing fans. Anyone who wants to have an idea of how many very good fights, entertaining fights, that Al Haymon has put on through PBC on free television in the United States, just head over to the PBC YouTube channel, which I'll leave a link to. It's not often that I will promote particularly big channels on YouTube, which don't need my promotion. I tend to promote smaller channels who are doing the kind of things that I'm doing, people, who need a leg up. But I'll promote the PBC channel because it's a great channel with great content. And just go and look how many great fights there's been. And the PBC YouTube channel don't even show all the channels. Don't even show all the fights that Al Haymon's shown on PBC. That's all stuff he's shown for free. Where are your free fights, Eddie Hearn? Where are your exciting, entertaining free fights? Where are they? As a boxing fan, I can accept that if boxing is being shown for free, the quality, I'm perfectly willing to accept that the quality won't be as good generally as on pay-per-view. I'm perfectly happy to accept that. If I want a card stacked top to bottom with the highest quality fights, I'm perfectly willing to accept that would have to be pay-per-view to pay all those fighters what they need to be paid. And when I'm getting something on free television, I'm perfectly willing to accept that it's not always going to be the highest quality in terms of high-profile fighters. There may be a high-profile guy taking on a journeyman, but there may be prospects at the same time who are evenly matched, and we've seen that on many PBC shows. Just look at last night's shows. Look at the Edwin Rodriguez fight. He's been on PBC twice in a row now, and he was in wars both times that were highly entertaining. And there are many such fights like that on PBC. When are you giving fans free fights like that, Eddie Hearn? You'd be putting something like that behind the paywall of pay-per-view. You wouldn't be giving it to people for free. And you've got the audacity to criticize Al Haymon. And you're always trying to justify pay-per-view by saying that your job is to maximize the earnings of your fighters. Well, that's what Al Haymon's doing too. And yet you've got the audacity to say he's paying them too much. You're looking at his balance books and saying that it don't balance out. So what if it don't balance out? That's his business. That's not your business. You should be happy since he's competition for you, Eddie Hearn, and he really is competition for you. He's signed 2 of your fighters. He's talking to terrestrial broadcasters in the UK, so he could be competing directly against you in the UK. So you should be happy that his books ain't balancing. You should be happy that his shows are losing money. But instead, no, you're coming out with all this vitriol and criticism. Al Haymon puts his fighters' earnings as his number one priority. That's what he's doing. Now, I don't know if he's doing that out of the goodness of his own heart or whether there's some type of master plan behind it. But as it is right now, it's fantastic for the fighters. And it's fantastic for the fans because they're getting all this free boxing. It's plain and simple. It don't matter which way you chop it or screw it. Boxing fans have been much better off since Al Haymon came on the scene than they were before. Much better off. If Al Haymon hadn't come on the scene, you would have had no free boxing. So how is him coming on the scene a bad thing for boxing fans? It's a great thing for boxing fans. Again, there are some bad fights, some mismatches, but there's some good fights too. The main thing is it's free for people to watch, and the fighters are getting well compensated for it. How is any of this bad? If he's losing money, that's his business. As fans, we can enjoy it for now. People are saying, oh, but it's unsustainable, this model. Well, let it be unsustainable. It's better that we have, let's say, 4 or 5 years of unsustainable free boxing than to have no years of free boxing at all, isn't it? What if somebody said they can pay your rent for 5 years, but only for 5 years? After that, you'll have to start paying it yourself again. Would you turn it down? Oh yeah, it can't last forever. It only is going to last 5 years, so it's no good. What are you talking about? You take the free situation while you can get it. And as boxing fans, that's how people should be looking at Al Haymon and PBC. And anyone with a right mind, any boxing fan in their right mind is going to look at it that way. They're not going to be complaining. Complaining about what? You can't complain about something that's given away for free. Complain about pay-per-views that Eddie Hearn puts on. Nathan Cleverly against Tony Bellew. Pay-per-view. Did you see that pay-per-view apart from the main event, it was stacked with mismatches. And the guy put that on pay-per-view. If that was an Al Haymon show in the United States, that would have been PBC free to air. Most of Eddie Hearn's cards, let's get it, let's be realistic. Name me one Eddie Hearn card that he's put on. Last year even, that if that was in America on an Al Haymon show, that wouldn't have been free on PBC. They would have all been free. And yet people complain, and yet Eddie Hearn's got the audacity to come out with what he's coming out with. Unbelievable. Yeah, Eddie, Al is giving people for free what you're making them pay through the nose for. How dare you criticize what he's doing and try to complain about it? Stop watching next man's pockets. Watch your own pockets. Yeah? You said that you gave people like Frank Warren and Mick Hennessy and all these establishment boxing figures in the UK a kick up the backside, and you did to a certain extent. But now it's time for someone to come and give you a kick up the backside and Sky a kick up the backside. And that's why I certainly hope that Uncle Al and his PBC brand finally arrives in the UK. I certainly hope so. Because guys like you, Eddie Hearn, need a kick up the backside for some of your BS pay-per-views and your StubHub and all this other stuff where you're ripping off the fans. Al Haymon is giving people free boxing, paying fighters well. If it's unsustainable, so what? Let's enjoy it while it's here. Yeah? And I know what this is all about, Eddie, anyway. It's about you feeling a threat from Al Haymon. That's what it's about. It's about you hoping that his business crashes and burns, because it will leave the market empty for you to step back in again and dominate with your pay-per-views all the time. And that's what Eddie Hearn was really talking about. When he's talking, let me go back and read this part in this article where he's saying you need less shows but more quality. That's basically what he's saying. And I'm telling you right now, Eddie Hearn, that many of Al Haymon's free shows are better quality than your pay-per-view shows, you joker. You're talking about better quality. Unbelievable. This guy's got some audacity, you know. That, like I say, the Bellew Cleverly, was that, what was that? You even look at Anthony Joshua versus Dylan White and the undercard of Eubank Jr. against Spike O'Sullivan. Now, those were good fights, but don't even think for a second that if those fights had taken place on a show in America under Al Haymon's watch, don't even think for a second that those fights would have been pay-per-view. They wouldn't have been. They would have been free to air on PBC. Yeah? Haymon is giving people value which is proportionate to what you're paying in terms of the marquee level of the fight. If it's really high level marquee names, then Al Haymon's going to put it on Showtime pay-per-view. But if it's good fighters who are prospects on the way up, like a Joshua against Dylan White, like a Spike O'Sullivan, Eubank Jr., that's going to go on PBC. That's where it's supposed to be. You, Eddie Hearn, are putting stuff on pay-per-view that's not supposed to be on pay-per-view. You joker. And you're criticizing someone like Al, who's putting them type of fights where they're supposed to be on free television. I mean, it's just insane to me. Oh gosh. You know, Eddie, put some world championship fights on free TV and then talk. Then criticize Al Haymon. Yeah, well, we know you're not going to do that. You're locked into Sky. Put them on normal Sky then. Put some decent, high quality fights, not involving, just British fighters, proper high quality fights. A fight like a Joshua Dylan White. A fight like, for example, an Adrian Broner against Sean Porter, which was on PBC free for everybody to watch. Even Keith Thurman's fights have been airing on PBC. Errol Spence's fights have been airing on PBC. Could you imagine if Eddie Hearn had Errol Spence in the UK? We'd never see this guy on free television. This guy be pay-per-viewed probably from his 13th, 14th fight if he was with Eddie Hearn. What a joke. So anyway, yeah, I had to put Eddie Hearn on blast. Fall back, Eddie. Stop watching the next man's pockets. Do you? Yeah, Uncle Al is giving people like you, greedy promoters like you, a kick up the backside. How dare you say he's paying fighters too much? Fighters need to be paid too much for what they're risking. Yeah, they need to be. If him paying fighters too much puts his business in the red, so be it. If somebody can put morals over profit, principles over profit, if everyone was putting principles over profit, the world would be a paradise. It would be a utopia. Constantly obsessing about always making a profit. That's why the world is, one of the reasons why the world is so messed up. It's a good thing if you've got the money, if you're not going to go personally bankrupt yourself, and as long as you're not going to bankrupt any of your fighters, it's a good thing to take a loss here and there for the benefit of the fighters who are not as well off as you. And Al Haymon's a very rich man. I'm sure his investors are going to get all their money back, and he's going to be the one who will pay for it if they don't, not his fighters. So let him worry about all that. Don't you worry about it. Be happy the fighters are getting paid well and the fans are getting free boxing. Yeah? And that's how everybody should look at it. Al Haymon has been wonderful for boxing, particularly boxing in the United States. If anyone is complaining about what Al Haymon has done, you are not a real boxing fan, and you've got some seriously dubious ulterior motives for not liking Al Haymon. Am I saying he's perfect in the way that he handles his himself in the world of boxing? No. Are there certain fights that he could have made but didn't make because of personal grievances with other promoters and other networks? Yes. But the same can be said for all the other promoters too, even though Haymon is not officially a promoter. But overall, when you weigh up the good and the bad, Haymon has been far better for boxing over the past few years than the likes of Bob Arum, Golden Boy, Eddie Hearn, etc. Far better. So anyway, rant over. Eddie Hearn, fall back, sit your ass down, son.